I was born in 1953 in Crossville, a small town on the border of Tennessee and Kentucky. Everybody here knew everybody else's business, and secrets hid behind fake smiles and neighborhood gossip. Our house was a simple wooden cabin a bit outside downtown, with a big front yard, a chicken coop in the backyard, and a vegetable garden my mom tended to with so much care. My dad, Ernest Oliver, was well respected around town. He ran a small general store that sold everything from kerosene and tools to cloth and candy. He was a man of few words, always serious, and ran a tight ship at home. When he came home from work, we all had to be quiet. Even our dog Buddy knew to hide under the porch. But he wasn't all tough. After church on Sundays, he'd sometimes bring home candy or buy us popsicles. But if anyone did something he didn't like, the whole house would explode. My mom was the complete opposite. She was tiny, with a soft voice, and her hands were never still. She spent all day cooking, tending the garden, and doing housework. Her cinnamon sweet potato pie was famous around the neighborhood. If that smell wafted through the house, we knew it was either a holiday or company was coming. Mom didn't talk much, especially not in front of Dad, but her eyes held so many unspoken stories, always with a hint of sadness, like she was carrying a heavy burden. We had 3 kids. I was the middle one. My older brother Joshua was 4 years older than me, and my little sister Celine was 3 years younger. Joshua had helped Dad at the store since he was a kid, getting up before dawn and coming home after dark. Celine was the family's ray of sunshine, pigtails, always laughing, and making up all kinds of little games. Our house was plain, but spotlessly clean. The living room had a wicker couch draped with a colorful quilt my mom made, a small table with a radio we only turned on for special occasions, and a picture of Jesus in a hand-carved wooden frame hanging on the wall. The wood-burning stove in the kitchen stayed lit all winter. The wooden cabinets held our dishes, and a big table was where we ate. Dad always sat at the head. We couldn't start eating until he said grace, and no one could leave the table until he was finished. Celine and I shared a bedroom with 2 small beds with straw mattresses, a wooden trunk for our few clothes, and prayer cards from Sunday school taped to the walls. Joshua slept in a little room at the back of the house, next to the storage room for tools and odds and ends. My childhood was filled with work and responsibility. By the age of 6, I was helping Mom take care of Celine, fetching water from the well, and feeding the chickens. I only went to school half-days. Crossville Elementary was a 2-story building on the town square, with a school bell ringing sharp at 7 in the morning. I loved school, especially when Mrs. Patterson told stories about faraway places. But those days didn't last long. When I turned 10, Dad decided girls didn't need much schooling and pulled me out to help more at home. Our games were simple back then, but full of joy. I'd play Ring Around the Roses in the yard with the neighborhood girls. Teresa, the butcher's daughter, Irene from the corner store, and the twins, Olivia and Opal. We'd make dolls out of scraps of cloth Mom gave us, or run down to the creek behind the house to catch minnows with nets and sticks. The boys played tops, marbles, and flew kites. We rarely mixed. My grandma Ethel, Dad's mom who lived 2 houses down, always said, "Girls who play with boys go bad." Life went on like that until I turned 11, and everything changed. The change started subtly, like a small dark cloud on a sunny day, growing bigger until it turned into a storm. My Uncle Christopher, Dad's older brother, came back to Crossville after working in Memphis for years. He was different from the other men in town, dressed like a city slicker, spoke nicely, had money in his pocket, and told stories that had the whole general store crowd laughing. He brought gifts for all of us, a new hat for Dad, a silk scarf for Mom, a slingshot for Joshua, a porcelain doll for Celine, and for me, a blue satin hair ribbon. "The prettiest niece deserves something special," he said as he tied it in my hair. I still remember his look, this creepy glint in his eye that made my skin crawl, even though I didn't know why yet. It didn't take long for Uncle Christopher to become Dad's business partner. They expanded the store, stocked more goods, and started supplying farms around the area. Dad seemed happier than ever, smiled more, brought home more gifts, and even let us turn on the radio on Sunday afternoons. But strange things started happening. Uncle Christopher began coming by the house more often, always when Dad and Joshua were at the store. He'd sneak me candy, ask me to show him the backyard, the garden, the chicken coop, all the places out of sight from the house. Mom seemed suspicious, but she never said a word. Maybe she was scared of Dad, or didn't want to start trouble with the brother-in-law who'd helped turn the family's luck around. It was an afternoon in November, hot as summer, when things got worse. I was home alone. Mom had taken Celine into town to buy cloth, and the men were at the store. I was hanging laundry when I heard his voice behind me. "Our little niece, growing more beautiful every day." He said it in that weird tone he only used when we were alone. Dear friends, what happened next is something no 11-year-old girl should ever have to go through. Those things hurt the soul more than the body, and even now, at 72, my hands shake just thinking about it.
A part of me died that day.
And it wasn't the last time. Uncle Christopher always had an excuse. "I came to get the tools I borrowed. I forgot some important papers. I wanted to ask your mom if I could have some chickens for Sunday dinner." He always found a way to corner me where no one could see or hear. I didn't fully understand what was happening, but I knew it was wrong, dirty, and painful. But I didn't know how to stop it. Who would believe me over the respected uncle who'd brought prosperity to the family? Dad saw him as a hero, and Mom couldn't even look Dad in the eye when she asked him for something. So I stayed silent, hid when I could, cried in secret, and prayed every night for it to end. But it didn't. 2 months later, my body started changing. I was ravenously hungry, nauseous in the mornings, and my period, something I'd had every month since I was 10, stopped suddenly. I knew something worse was coming. I didn't really understand what was wrong with me, but Mom figured it out soon enough. One morning, she found me vomiting behind the chicken coop. She wiped my mouth with her apron, looked at me with those eyes that saw everything, and held my face in her hands. "Baby, something's not right with you. Are you pregnant?" Her voice was shaking, not with anger, but with pure terror. I threw myself into her arms and sobbed. Couldn't say who'd done it, how or when, just cried like a lost child, which is exactly what I was. Mom held me tight, like she was trying to shield me from the whole world with her tiny arms. "Your daddy'll be home soon. We have to tell him." Her voice a warning of the storm to come. That afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table, shaking like a leaf in the wind, waiting for Dad. Mom had sent Celine to play at the neighbors and told Joshua to stay late at the store. She wanted the 3 of us alone for this. Dad knew something was wrong the second he walked in. Mom never sat around waiting for him. She was always standing, putting dinner on the table. "What's wrong? Who died?" he asked, hanging his hat on the door. Mom looked at me, giving me courage, but the words stuck in my throat. Finally, Mom spoke up. "The girl's pregnant." Dad frowned, confused. "Pregnant with what?" "A baby, Ernest. Our daughter's having a baby." The silence that followed was the heaviest I've ever known. Dad stood frozen, his hand still on the doorknob, like he couldn't decide whether to come in or run away. Then he slowly walked to the table, pulled out a chair, and sat in front of me, but he wouldn't look me in the eye. "Who's the bastard?" I was shaking so hard. How could I say it? How could I tell him it was his own brother, his business partner, the man who'd brought the family good fortune? "Speak up." He slammed his fist on the table, making me jump. It's... I couldn't get the words out. It must have been one of those boys from school, or Jeremiah's boy who's always hanging around. "I'll kill the bastard." I was so desperate, I didn't know what to do until Mom spoke. "It wasn't any boy, Ernest. I think it was your brother." The world stopped. Dad stared at Mom with wide eyes, then turned to me, his face turning from pale to bright red. "Say that again?" Mom never talked back to Dad, always kept her head down, but this time she found a courage I'd never seen. "I've seen Christopher coming around when you're not here. He's always trying to be alone with her. Just the other day, I came home early from the neighbors and saw him running out of the backyard in a hurry. Gertrude was there crying, her clothes all messed up. Dad stood up so fast, he knocked his chair over. He lunged at me, grabbed my arm, and shook me hard. "Is this true? My own brother? Did you let him do this? Did you want it?" I could only cry, too weak to defend myself. "He forced me, Daddy. He hurt me." I tried to scream, but he covered my mouth and said he'd kill me if I told anyone. Dad let go of me like I was burning him, stepping back 2 paces. The look on his face is one I'll never forget. Not pain, not anger, but disgust. Disgust for me. "You're making this up to protect some boyfriend. My brother would never do something this low." "Ernest, look at the girl. She's telling the truth." Mom tried to argue. "Shut up," he yelled. And for the first time, I saw Dad hit Mom. She fell to the floor, her lip bleeding. I ran to help her, but Dad grabbed my arm. He dragged me out of the kitchen, down the hallway, and to the basement door. The basement was dark and damp. We used it to store potatoes, onions, and other things that needed to stay cool. "You stay here until I figure out what to do with you and this shame in your belly," he said, shoving me down the stairs. I fell onto the wooden steps, my whole body aching. I heard the door slam shut and the key turn in the lock. In the darkness, only a thin crack in the wall let in a sliver of light. I curled up there, crying softly, afraid to anger Dad more. I could hear him and Mom arguing upstairs. Time dragged on. Through that crack, I watched day turn to night, and no one came for me. I slept on the dirt floor, holding myself, trying to protect the small life growing inside me, even though I didn't fully understand what that meant. I was woken by the sound of the basement door unlocking. It was still dark outside, the sky black through the crack. I thought it was Mom, but it was Joshua. My brother had heard the shouting and arguing. No one had told him directly, but in a small house like ours, secrets couldn't stay hidden. "You have to leave now," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder nervously. "Dad'll be back tomorrow." I stood up, my legs weak from being cramped in that damp, narrow space. Joshua helped me up the basement stairs, and we walked silently through the dark kitchen. Mom was there, wrapping something in a cloth. "Some bread and cheese," she said, handing me the package. Then she pulled a folded envelope from her apron pocket. "This is money I saved from selling pies. It's not much, but it'll help until you find a place to stay." "Mommy, where am I supposed to go?" I asked, my voice breaking with fear and sadness. "Knoxville," Joshua answered. "Mom has a cousin there, Mrs. Beatrice. She doesn't know anything. Mom wrote her, said you're going to help her with housework, and she'll take you in for a while." I looked at Mom, tears in her eyes. "But what when my belly gets big? When the baby comes?" "One step at a time, baby." Mom swallowed hard. "First you need to get out of here, away from Dad, away from your uncle. We'll worry about later. Maybe your dad will calm down in time." I knew it was a fantasy. Dad would never accept this, never forgive me. In his eyes, I dishonored the family, brought shame to our name. What about Celine? I thought of my little sister. "She'll understand when she's older." Mom finally cried. "We have to go," Joshua interrupted anxiously. "Gene's got his truck waiting at the end of the street." Gene was my brother's friend, a few years older, who made a living hauling goods around town. Joshua said he'd agreed to drive me to the Crossville train station, where I'd catch a train to Knoxville. Mom held me tight, like she was trying to memorize every part of me. "God bless you, baby. Take care of yourself, and take care of this little one. Don't let anyone hurt you again." We couldn't say anything else. Our throats were too tight with tears. Joshua took my hand, and we slipped out the back door. The early morning air gave me goosebumps. I was only wearing a simple dress, a wool cardigan, the same one I'd had on when I was locked in the basement, and a pair of worn-out leather sandals. Joshua led me around the back of the house, avoiding the main street where someone might see us. When we got to the road out of town, Gene's truck was waiting right where they'd planned. He waved nervously. "Get in, hide under the tarp," he said, barely looking at me. "If anyone stops us, don't make a sound." Joshua helped me climb into the truck and pulled the tarp over me. Under there, I lay between sacks of grain, barely able to breathe, surrounded by the smell of dust and sweat. The truck rumbled to life, and every bump in the road jolted my already sore body. "I'll try to talk to Dad." Joshua's voice was almost drowned out by the wheels. "When things settle down, maybe," but there was no conviction in his voice. We both knew I'd never be coming back. The drive to the train station was slow and painful. By the time we got there, the sky was starting to lighten. Joshua helped me climb out of the truck and led me to a quiet corner away from the small station. "The train comes in an hour," he said, handing me a small packet. "Here's your ticket, and some money me and Gene scraped together." "Thank you, Joshua," I said, my voice barely a whisper, overcome with emotion. My brother looked around nervously. "I have to get back before Dad wakes up and finds the basement key missing. Can you take care of yourself?" I nodded, even though I wasn't sure. He hugged me quickly, then ran back to the truck, where Gene was waiting impatiently. I stood alone at that almost empty station, holding nothing but a simple package and a heavy heart, waiting for the train that would take me away from everything I knew. The train arrived right on time, steaming and roaring. I climbed aboard, trembling, and found an empty seat. As the train pulled away, I looked out the window, watching Crossville, the town where I'd been born and raised, fade into the distance. A part of me, along with my stolen childhood, stayed there. The journey was long. I had to change trains in Chattanooga, waiting for hours before boarding the one to Knoxville. People stared at me, this plain-dressed girl traveling alone without an adult. I kept my head down, avoiding their eyes and their questions. It was night when I arrived in Knoxville. The station was much busier than Crossville's, with people rushing around. I stood there, lost, not knowing where to go. Mom had given me Mrs. Beatrice's address in her letter, but I had no idea how to get there. A man in a uniform, one of the station workers, walked over. "Lost, little girl?" I showed him the address written on a piece of paper. He frowned. "That's on the other side of town. Too far to walk, especially at night." My eyes filled with tears. He must have felt sorry for me, because he called over a boy nearby. "Oscar, take this girl to Magnolia Street. It's a ways, but I'll give you a tip." The boy looked no older than 16, riding an old bicycle with a rack on the back. "Hop on, hold tight," he said, pointing to the back. And just like that, I was holding on to a stranger's waist, riding to Mrs. Beatrice's house. It was a simple house, much like mine, but with a well-tended garden in the front, full of flowers. My heart raced as I knocked on the door. What if she wasn't home? What if she wouldn't take me in? The door opened, and a woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun looked at me suspiciously. "Who are you?" "I'm Gertrude, Dorothy's daughter. Did you get her letter?" Her expression softened a little. "I did, but I didn't expect you so soon." She glanced at the bicycle boy waiting a few steps away. "You can go home, son. The girl's safe now." The boy waved and rode off into the night. Mrs. Beatrice opened the door wider, letting me in. The house was small but cozy. The living room had an old couch, a small table covered with a crocheted tablecloth, and a religious icon hanging on the wall, just like at my house. "Your mother said you're here to help with housework, get a change of scenery," she said. I just nodded, not knowing what to say. She studied me for a minute, her eyes lingering on my still flat belly. "You must be hungry. There's soup on the stove." I nodded again, suddenly realizing I hadn't eaten properly in days. She led me to the kitchen, poured me a bowl of chicken and dumpling soup, and sat across from me, watching me eat. "Your mother didn't tell me the whole truth, did she?" she suddenly asked. I froze with my spoon halfway to my mouth. "What do you mean?" "I'm not 3 years old, girl. No mother sends her 11-year-old daughter away just to help with housework." I looked down at my bowl, unable to meet her eyes, and set the spoon down. "You don't have to talk about it now," she said, her tone softer. "Finish your soup, then I'll show you where you'll sleep." And just like that, I started a new life in Knoxville, living with a distant cousin I barely knew, carrying a secret in my belly, a secret that would change my life forever, though I didn't know it then. Days turned into weeks at Mrs. Beatrice's house. At first, she was polite, but kept her distance. I helped clean the house, do laundry, and chop vegetables for lunch. I slept in a small room at the back of the house, tiny but clean, with a window facing a pomegranate tree. At night, lying in that narrow bed, I'd hold my belly, where the first signs of life were starting to show. Mrs. Beatrice never asked me any questions, but I noticed she watched me, keeping an eye on my changing body, my morning sickness, and my clothes that were getting tighter by the day. One afternoon, I was hanging sheets in the backyard when she walked over holding a dress. "This was my daughter's when she was pregnant with Tony," she said, handing it to me. "It'll be more comfortable than what you're wearing." I took the dress, and tears filled my eyes. It was the first time anyone had acknowledged my condition openly, without judgment, only sympathy. "Thank you, Mrs. Beatrice." She nodded, sighed, and asked the question I knew was coming. "How far along are you?" "Almost 4 months," I whispered. "Where's the father?" I looked down, unable to speak. She didn't push, just put her hand on my shoulder. "When you're ready to talk, I'm here." 2 weeks later, my worst fear came true. It was a Sunday, and we'd just gotten back from church. Mrs. Beatrice liked to go early, when it was less crowded. We were walking down Main Street, when a face made my blood run cold. It was my dad. He was talking to some men in front of a store, not seeing me at first. I grabbed Mrs. Beatrice's arm and pulled her into an alley. "What's wrong, child? You look like you've seen a ghost." "My dad," I whispered, trembling. He's right there, in front of Mr. Henderson's store. Mrs. Beatrice peeked around the corner, then pulled me deeper into the alley between two houses. The man with the black hat, talking to Henderson? I nodded, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might faint. We'll go around the back of the houses, she decided, leading me down a path I didn't know. Are you sure it's him? Positive, Mrs. Beatrice. If he sees me... I couldn't finish the sentence. When we got back to the house, I panicked, running to my small room and shoving my few clothes into a bag. What are you doing? Mrs. Beatrice asked, standing in the doorway. I have to leave. If Dad finds me, he'll take me back, or worse. She walked into the room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. I think it's time you told me what's really going on. And so I did. I told her everything for the first time. The abuse by my uncle, finding out I was pregnant, Dad's reaction, the basement, the desperate escape. The words poured out of me, like water breaking through a dam. All the pent-up pain and fear finally finding a way out. When I finished, I was exhausted, tears dried on my face. Mrs. Beatrice sat silently for a long time, staring at the wall as if she could see far beyond it. Finally, she took a deep breath. Your mother knew you were pregnant when she sent you here. She knew, and she didn't tell me the truth. She shook her head, but she didn't look angry. I understand her fear, but it made things harder. Are you going to make me leave? I asked, terrified again. No, child, but you can't stay here. Not with your dad in town. Knoxville's not that big. Soon people will be talking, saying Dorothy's cousin is harboring a pregnant girl. Then where do I go? I have a friend, Sister Constance. She works at St. Mary's Home in Hartselle. It's a place for girls in trouble. An orphanage? I asked, more scared than ever. No, not an orphanage. It's a shelter run by nuns. They help girls who need a safe place to have their babies. No one asks questions there. No one judges. I thought about it, going to another strange place, starting over. But I had no other choice. Will Dad be able to find me there? He'll never know you're there. And even if he did, the nuns wouldn't let him take you. The Mother Superior doesn't even fear the bishop, let alone some man from Crossville. That night, Mrs. Beatrice wrote a letter to Sister Constance. Early the next morning, she took me to the station, bought me a ticket to Hartselle, and packed me a bag of food for the journey. When you get there, ask for St. Mary's Home. Give this letter to Sister Constance, and she'll take care of you. I hugged Mrs. Beatrice tightly. She'd taken me in without complaint, and now she was helping me again. Thank you for everything, Mrs. Beatrice. God bless you, child. Take care of that little angel in your belly. The trip to Hartselle was much calmer than the first one. I wasn't that scared little girl running away in the middle of the night anymore. I was still afraid, still hurting, but I had a new strength, a determination to protect the life growing inside me. When I arrived in Hartselle, I asked a man sweeping the sidewalk at the station where St. Mary's Home was. It's on the edge of town, near the river, he explained. About 2 miles from here. Go down this street to the end, turn right at Quinn's store, and you'll see the white fence. I thanked him and started walking. It was a hot day, and even in the loose dress Mrs. Beatrice had given me, I was sweating. By the time I saw the white fence of the shelter, my legs were shaking with exhaustion. The shelter was an old building with a big iron gate in front. I pulled the doorbell rope and waited. After a few minutes, a young nun opened a small window in the gate. Can I help you? She asked, looking at me curiously. I'm looking for Sister Constance. Mrs. Beatrice from Knoxville sent me. She opened the gate and let me in. The yard was big, with a well-kept garden. Several girls were sitting on stone benches, talking or doing needlework. Wait here, the young nun said, pointing to a bench under a tree. I sat down, looking around at the place that might become my new home. The girls stared at me, curious about the newcomer. Some looked very young, others were in their late teens. Several had obvious baby bumps, at different stages of pregnancy. A few minutes later, the young nun came back with an older woman wearing round glasses, serious-looking but not unkind. You must be Gertrude, she said, sitting next to me on the bench. I'm Sister Constance. Mrs. Beatrice sent a telegram saying you'd be coming. I handed her the letter Mrs. Beatrice had written. She read it silently, her lips pressed together. I see, she finally said, folding the letter carefully. You can stay here, child. This is a sanctuary for girls who need protection. I don't have any money to pay, I said, remembering that the money Mom and Joshua had given me was almost gone. The home is supported by donations, and the work we do here. Everyone helps as much as they can, cooking, cleaning, gardening, the sewing room. We'll provide you with a place to stay, food, medical care, and help you deliver your baby safely. What happens after that? I asked the question that had been haunting me since I found out I was pregnant. That's up to you, Gertrude, Sister Constance said, adjusting her glasses and studying me for a moment. Some girls choose to place their babies for adoption. We have wonderful families waiting to welcome them. Others decide to keep their babies, and we help them start over. Find jobs, find a place to live. The choice is yours. The thought of giving my baby to strangers made my heart ache. No matter how young I was, no matter how terrible the circumstances of his conception, he was mine, my only family now. I want to keep him, I said firmly, surprised by my own resolve. Sister Constance nodded, as if she'd expected me to say that. Then we'll prepare for that. But first, you need to rest. You look exhausted. She called over the young nun who'd greeted me. Sister Angela, take our new resident to the intake dormitory, then help her get cleaned up and changed. And just like that, I walked into St. Mary's home, a place that would be my sanctuary for the next few months. It was there that I learned new skills, made unexpected friends, and finally gave birth to my son in an environment of peace and acceptance, far away from violence and hatred. When I arrived, there were 15 other girls, some older than me, some even younger. Each had her own story, her own pain, her own secrets. We never asked each other for details, it was an unspoken rule. But at night in the dormitory, we'd share our fears of childbirth, our hopes for the future, and our dreams for our unborn babies. The nuns were strict but fair. The daily routine was structured. Wake-up bell at 5 in the morning, prayer, then a simple coffee in the dining hall, followed by assigned work, some in the garden, some in the kitchen, some doing laundry, some cleaning. I was assigned to the sewing room, maybe because Sister Constance noticed how nimble my fingers were, or maybe because my belly was getting too big for heavy work. In the sewing room, I learned more than just how to sew. I learned delicate mending, monogramming sheets, and turning scraps of cloth into beautiful quilts. Sister Dorothy, who ran the room, was demanding but patient. Gertrude, sewing is like life, she said, watching my uneven stitches. You need patience, attention to detail, and to remember that every stitch matters in the final piece. As my hands learned the skills of sewing, my heart learned to accept. At first, I was filled with anger at my uncle for what he'd done, anger at my dad for not believing me, even anger at God for allowing it all to happen. The nuns never tried to make me forgive. They just listened when I wanted to talk, and respected my silence when I didn't. When I was 7 months pregnant, I received my first letter from Joshua. It had traveled a long way, first to Mrs. Beatrice in Knoxville, who'd forwarded it to the shelter. I opened it, trembling. Dear sister, he wrote in his messy handwriting. Hope you're doing okay. A lot has changed here. Dad figured out you ran away the same day. He was furious. He went to Knoxville looking for you, but you were already gone. When he came back, he took it all out on Uncle Christopher. There was a terrible fight at the store. Uncle denied everything and called Dad crazy. In the end, their partnership fell apart. Christopher went back to Memphis, and Dad kept the store, but business is bad. Mom's sad, and Celine asks about you all the time. I got your address from Mrs. Beatrice. Write back if you can. Your brother, Joshua. I cried for a long time after reading that letter, as if a part of my past had found me, reminding me that despite everything, I still had family. I wrote back that same day, telling him I was okay, that the baby would be here soon, and that I'd learn to sew. I didn't mention my plans for after the baby was born. I wasn't sure myself. 2 weeks later, when I was 8 months pregnant, I received another letter, this time from Mom. Her handwriting was hesitant, like each word had cost her a great effort. My baby, she wrote. I'm so sorry I didn't protect you. After you left, your dad changed a lot. The truth finally came out. Before your uncle went back to Memphis, he confessed everything, not because he was sorry, but to get back at your dad for kicking him out of the business. Your dad fell apart. He drinks every day, can barely work, and sometimes, when he thinks no one's listening, he calls your name. I don't know if the two of you will ever reconcile, but I know I love you, and I pray for you and the baby. If you ever want to come home, there will always be a place for you. Love, Mom. That letter hit me hard. Uncle Christopher's confession meant Dad finally knew the truth. I hadn't lied. I hadn't tempted anyone. I'd been a victim in my own home. A part of me felt immense relief, like a heavy burden had been lifted. But another part felt new anger. Why did it take Uncle Christopher's confession for Dad to believe me? Why weren't my words enough? In my weekly talks with Sister Constance, I shared my pain. Male pride is a terrible thing, Gertrude, she sighed. Your father chose to believe a convenient lie rather than face a painful truth. Now he's paying for that. Do you think I should forgive him? I asked, confused. That's not for me to decide. Forgiveness isn't an obligation. It's a gift, both to the one who forgives and the one who's forgiven. But it takes time. Only you will know when, or if, you're ready. Those words stayed with me for days, lingering in my mind as I sewed, as I ate, as I felt the baby move inside me. And just as I was lost in those thoughts, my first contraction hit. For a 12-year-old girl, childbirth was long and painful. 16 hours of agony and fear, with Sister Angela holding my hand the entire time, never leaving my side. When I finally heard my son's cry, all the pain seemed worth it. Matthew, I whispered as they placed him in my arms. His name is Matthew. What a beautiful name, Sister Constance said, coming as soon as she heard the news. It means gift of God. And that's exactly what he was. A gift, not a memory of violence, but a blessing, a new chance, a fresh start. Looking down at that red, wrinkled little face, I made a silent promise. I would never tell him how he was conceived, never let him carry the hatred I'd felt. He would only grow up in love, deeply loved. In the months that followed, I learned to be a mother. The nuns helped me so much, teaching me how to feed him, bathe him, and soothe him when he cried at night. The other girls who'd had babies shared their tips too. We were like a little community of young mothers, learning together. But I knew I couldn't stay at the shelter forever. When Matthew was 6 months old, Sister Constance sat me down for a serious talk. Gertrude, it's time to think about your next steps, she said. What do you plan to do? I'd thought about it a lot. I don't want to go back to Crossville, not right now. Maybe when Matthew's older, when I'm stronger. But for now, I want to build a new life for the two of us. I understand, she nodded. Is there somewhere you'd like to go? If I could, I'd like to stay in Hartselle. I'm used to this town, I know some people, and I've learned to sew. Maybe I could get a job with Mrs. Nancy, the dressmaker on the town square. She came to donate to the shelter once and mentioned she needed help. Sister Constance smiled. I was thinking the same thing. I spoke to Mrs. Nancy last week, and she's willing to give you a chance. We have a small house not far from here, simple, but clean and safe. You and Matthew can live there, paying a nominal rent until you're on your feet. I couldn't help crying. It was more than I'd hoped for, more than I thought I deserved. Why are you helping me so much? I asked through tears. Because I see a strength in you that you might not see in yourself, she said, taking my hand. You've been through something terrible, Gertrude, something that would break many people. But here you are, caring for your son with love, planning for the future. That's courage, and courage deserves to be rewarded. The next week, I moved into that little house on Acacia Street. It was a wooden cabin with 2 bedrooms, a living room, a kitchen, and a small backyard. The furniture was simple, some donated by the shelter, some given by the community, but it was our home. Matthew's first real home, and the first place I could call my own since leaving Crossville. 3 days later, I started working with Mrs. Nancy, bringing Matthew with me. She set up a small crib in the back of the shop, and Matthew would sleep there while I worked. My nimble fingers and the skills I'd learned at the shelter impressed the older dressmaker, and she soon trusted me with more complex work. Girl, you've got a gift, she said, looking at my precise stitches. One day, you'll have a shop of your own. Mark my words. I smiled, thanking her for the compliment, but more for the trust. Someone believed I had a future, and that meant the world to me. And so, Matthew and I started our new life, one day at a time, one stitch at a time. We were mending more than just cloth. We were mending a new fate, one free from the shadows of the past. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I looked at it with hope. Time flies, doesn't it? It feels like just yesterday I arrived in Hartselle with baby Matthew, not knowing what the future held. And now, nearly 60 years have passed. The tiny baby in my arms is now a 61-year-old man with gray hair and wrinkles, who smiles just like his father, a resemblance only I know about and have kept silently to myself all these years. Hartselle has been good to us. After working with Mrs. Nancy for 5 years, I saved enough money to open my own sewing shop. It was small, just one room on Maple Street. At first, I only did mending, hem pants, and altered dresses, but business took off quickly. Young ladies in town started coming to me for party dresses and later, wedding gowns. They said I had magic fingers, that I mended more than just cloth, I mended dreams. Matthew grew up surrounded by scraps of fabric and spools of thread, learning to respect hard work and effort. He was a curious, smart boy, and the nuns at the shelter helped us so much, securing him a scholarship to St. Francis School. That's where he discovered his love for numbers, for math. At 18, he got into college in Nashville to study accounting. It was hard to watch him leave, but I knew it was the best thing for him. "Mom, you won't be lonely," he promised before he left. "I'll come back every weekend." He kept that promise for a long time until he met Claire, a store owner's daughter, in Nashville. They got married when they were 23, and I insisted on making Claire's wedding dress. It was the most beautiful one I'd ever made. They settled in Nashville, and Matthew opened his own accounting firm. Grandchildren followed, first Edward, then Lucy, and later great-grandchildren, little Helen and Gabriel, the lights of my old age. I've stayed in Hartselle all these years, and my sewing shop grew. I hired help, giving other girls a chance to learn a trade, just like Mrs. Nancy and the nuns had done for me. Some of those girls came from St. Mary's Home, which had been a sanctuary for girls in need for decades until it closed in the 1990s after the Mother Superior passed away. I never married. Of course, there were suitors. Mr. Jerome from the pharmacy, a widower who courted me for nearly 2 years. He was a good man, well-respected in town. And Dr. Thomas, who came from Memphis, also showed an interest. But after everything I'd been through, I could never fully trust any man again. I preferred to dedicate my life to my son, my work, and later, my grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Now, at 72, I live a quiet life. I closed my sewing shop 5 years ago, when my eyes couldn't see the tiny stitches anymore and my hands started to ache from arthritis. But I still make clothes for myself and the kids in the family. The house I live in now, on Magnolia Street, is the one I bought in the 1980s, bigger than the little house on Acacia Street, with a special room for my old sewing machine and shelves full of colorful fabric. Every morning, I wake up with the sun, make coffee, water my flowers, and sit on the porch to watch the day begin. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I go to the senior group at church. We do crafts, light exercises, and mostly just talk. They're good friends I've made over the years. None of them know my whole story. Some parts are too heavy to tell, but they all know I raised Matthew alone, and they respect that. On Sundays, I make pecan sweet potato pie, Mom's recipe, which I've kept in my heart all these years. The sweet smell fills the house, bringing back memories of my childhood, the good ones, before everything changed. I always save some for when Matthew and his family come to visit, usually once a month. It's such a joy to have the house full of noise, to hear my grandchildren tell their stories, and watch my great-grandchildren run around being mischievous. Over the years, I've kept in touch with my family in Crossville through letters. Mom wrote every week at first, then every month, telling me news from home and sending photos of Celine growing up. Joshua also wrote from time to time, updating me on Dad. The news was always sporadic. I knew he never really recovered from what happened. The store closed, and he had to take a job at another shop. He started drinking heavily, and his health declined. When Matthew was 10, I got word that Dad had died. Years of heavy drinking had caused a heart attack. I felt a mix of emotions, relief, but also deep sadness for all the things that could have been but never were. I took Matthew to the funeral. It was the first time I'd been back to Crossville since I'd run away. No one asked who Matthew's father was. Everyone seemed to know, or at least suspect, the truth. 5 years later, Mom died of pneumonia. Joshua got married, had 3 kids, and still lives in Crossville. Celine moved to Atlanta after she got married, and we lost touch over the years. As for my uncle Christopher, I never heard from him again after he went back to Memphis. To be honest, I never wanted to. Looking back today, my life hasn't been easy, but it's been full. I turned pain into strength, fear into courage. I raised a kind, honest, hardworking son, watched my grandchildren grow, and now get to see my great-grandchildren thrive. What more could an old grandma ask for? Dear friends, if there's one thing I've learned in this long life of mine, it's this. No one has the right to take away our dignity, whether it's a family member, a husband, a boss, or anyone else. What happened to me when I was 11 was a great injustice. An uncle who betrayed his family's trust, a father who didn't believe his own daughter. But I refuse to let that define who I am. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't run away from that basement, if I'd accepted the fate Dad had planned for me. I wouldn't have Matthew, wouldn't have my grandchildren and great-grandchildren, wouldn't have met the nuns who took me in, Mrs. Beatrice who helped me, Mrs. Nancy who gave me a chance, or become Gertrude the dressmaker, who's been known in Hartzell all these years. When abuse happens in a family, it's like a storm that destroys everything. You feel lonely, abandoned, with no way out. But I want you to know, there is always a way out. There are always people willing to help. Even when it seems like the whole world has turned its back on you, there is always hope. I'm living proof of that. Mom risked everything to help me escape. My brother overcame his fear to give me a way out. And later, so many people came into my life. Angels in disguise, ordinary people with kind hearts. Life is not just what happens to us. It's how we respond to it. I could have let resentment and hatred consume me. I could have given up when I was 11 years old, facing the prospect of raising a baby alone. But I chose to keep going. I chose to turn every stitch into a declaration. I am capable. I deserve good things. If you're going through a hard time right now, if you feel like there's no hope, listen to me. You're stronger than you think. Life can bend you, but it can't break you. Believe me, after the storm, there is always calm. In every country, every culture, respect for human rights, especially the rights of children, must be sacred. If you know someone who is in an abusive situation, don't stay silent. Seek help from local authorities, from advocacy groups. Be part of the solution because no one should have to bear the burden of violence alone. May God bless you, dear friends. Always remember, no matter how dark the night, the sun will rise again.